I don't know about you, but Christmas is my favorite time of the year, and I've made a commitment to try to speak to someone from a different country every year about their Christmas experience and traditions. This year, we're diving into Italian Christmas traditions, and what better person to talk to than author of the brand new graphic novel, Genu, Tom, over at Tom and LA Books today. So we're going to spend time today talking about Italian traditions, Italian food, and maybe a few questions about what's in this very Italian Christmas book. Let's talk with Tom today and find out all about it. All right, Tom, so we've got a burning question here. We need to know, what are your favorite Italian Christmas traditions?
Yeah. So this could be 6.5 hours type of essay on. I know that it's a difficult question. Okay, it's not easy even for an Italian because, as you guys know, the boot is very long because it's all fragmented. Each little province, each little region, each little town has their own.
Oh, that's
So
fine.
I'm sure that your viewers are expecting nothing less. So let's get ready, okay?
All right, I got my notes ready. Let's do this.
Grab my notepad.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Maybe we start off with the fine-tuned question of, where in Italy are you originally from, Tom? Like, tell us a little bit more about like your region specifically.
Absolutely. So I was born in a town called Trento, Trento, Trento. And this town is up north, very, very close to Austria, to the border with Austria. Therefore, the culture, the environment, the habits around the cultural traditions are very similar to the Austro-Hungarian type of culture up there. In fact, you wouldn't even think that they are typical Italian because of that difference from the stereotypical Italy that you might have in mind. No, you guys, because you're very sophisticated people, of course.
Oh dear.
But what makes my family maybe interesting, and especially with my brother, because my mother is from Lecce, which is down south in Puglia. And so if you have Italy, this is the heel of the boot, okay? Let's try to do this. This is the heel of the boot. This is Puglia. This is Calabria, and this is Puglia. And so it's very, very down south. And she's from there. Her family then migrated to the north. And of course, the traditions from her family's point of view are totally different from the traditions of my father's for Christmas. In fact, to the point that we used to have, back in my day, a dinner with my, exactly, 2 Christmases, a dinner with my mother's family, eating a type of food that was completely different from the food that we would eat at lunch on the 25th with my father's family. So that's a tale of 2 Christmases.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, so food is something that we're going to have to get into. I don't know if we're doing it right now, Tom, but maybe we go back to young Tom. Let's think about when Tom was 10 years old, right? What are some of the traditions that you remember from the youth that just like bring back some of that nostalgia for you?
Well, it was a very nostalgic time because the Second World War had just finished, and no, I'm kidding. It's it's a little bit late after that, but in terms of traditions, I'm sure what I can bring as an example is we had some let's say quasi religious tradition, which was as very little kids. My grandpa was in charge to make us believe that baby Jesus was coming as a little light flying around and bringing us the gifts. So he had us next to the window looking out for fast moving lights in the sky. That would be baby Jesus bringing the gifts instead of Santa. So that's already a difference with a big portion of Europe, I guess. Because we didn't really have Santa, we had baby Jesus. And but this thing that it was a little light, I think was completely my grandpa's creation, invention. And so, but he was very good at convincing us. And so when you're a kid, you also tend to see the things that you're imagining, right? So I still can remember actually seeing the little light, and it's in my memory. So either he was, a magician or something, but we actually saw that light with my brother, and it was a way to distract the kids while obviously the gifts were positioned. That was one of the great traditions. We always had the I don't even know if I know the word in English. Nativity, the nativity just underneath the tree, and depending on where Christmas would take place, it could be in town in Trento, or up in the mountain, because Trento is surrounded by the Alps, by the mountains. And that was the best of the best, to spend Christmas Eve in the mountains, completely covered in snow, was the very, very best thing, especially because there are so many trees up there and pine trees that everybody can just go out and grab one, and that's your tree. You don't need to really make a big effort. And that was my favorite when we spent the Christmas Eve up there, which is maybe 30 minutes, 35 minutes from the city of Trento. It's a town that has 90,000, 100,000 people.
So you had the same kind of traditions, I guess, we still have today with the trees. Now, like, was there a special, we always kind of decorated it, and then, put out, the presents got put out, and then Santa brought their presents, on Christmas morning. Were there any special traditions of like decorating the tree, or what presents came when? Do you guys have stockings? Was there anything like you got the coal if you were a bad boy, baby Jesus didn't bring you anything? What are some of the similarities between Americanized Christmas and Italian
You're actually
Christmas?
mentioning some very interesting points, because the gifts for us were always only on the eve of the 24th. So we would receive the gifts on the evening of the 24th, and then on the 25th we would just celebrate with this other family and have lunch. But you mentioned the kind of call for that's actually interesting, because we had another more kind of religious oriented tradition, which was Saint Lucy. And Saint Lucy in Italy, well, she came 2 days ago. She comes on the 13th of December. And she was a Sicilian saint. She was blind. She kind of flies on her donkey, and she comes to your house.
Sorry.
That's what she does. She flies
cool.
on her donkey. She comes to your house, and she is the one who, if you have not been a good kid, she will leave a lump of coal for you. So back in our times, I think we had something like sugar, fake coal made of sugar. And a couple of times, both me and my brother received that from St. Lucy, which wasn't great, but it was still sugar. So, it's not proper coal,
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. But I don't think Italians use the, how do you call it? The sock for...
Stocking.
The stocking for Christmas. That's not an Italian tradition. I was an exchange student in the US when I was 15. And so there I lived my first different Christmas. And so, the gifts being opened in the morning of the 25th was something completely new for me. The stockings were something completely new for me. And nobody mentioned baby Jesus was something new.
Santa Claus.
Yeah. Yes. It's weird, man, because and it's cool that you're doing this series, because you can see really so many differences from all over the world, right?
Yeah, we did Germany last year. And if you were bad in Germany, you got kidnapped like Krampus or Bell's Nickel. I was like, whoa, you got serious over here, Germany.
Yeah, they don't
Don't
mess
mess around. Yeah.
Nope.
No, I wouldn't mess with them at all. Yep, I think it's appropriate though that your country doesn't use the stocking, considering that your country looks like a boot. So
Yeah.
I never thought about that. That's a good point. We're gonna add a little special effect, special sound.
So Tom, I've told you before, I spent a little amount of time in Italy, and it just so happened it was after Thanksgiving. Now, I was in Florence, Firenze, and it was amazing where I was there as they were putting up the markets. I don't know if that's common across all
It is.
all Italy. Okay, that was going to be my question is, when do you see those markets pop up? And what was that like? Does everybody go to the markets like on the weekends? Is it like you go once? Like, what is the tradition of markets in your experience?
Yeah, it is. It is a tradition that happens all over Italy, but the content, the products that are being sold in each market are again completely different because it's an opportunity for local, crafts and craftsmen from not only from the town but kind of the valleys all around to come to town and bring their how do you say handiworks and everything that they maybe it's something in wood or paintings or some specific type of wine or honey, really really lovely stuff. And of course up in the north is going to be more kind of wine related, the warm wine. There are many kinds of the type of wine
That's where I'd be going.
that comes
The
with
spice wine.
the spice wine with clover, which is delicious, and a lot of candles and wooden sculptures. This is very typical of northern Italy. And of course, all types of foods, from sausages to cheeses that come from the mountain. Yes, don't get me
It's my
started.
love language right there.
Yeah.
No, Leslie, you didn't like the food story, remember? You didn't
I didn't like the
story.
food story, but if I'm eating it, that's a whole completely different matter altogether.
Now let's ask Tom about that, because so we read this collection of stories called A Very Italian Christmas, and one of the stories in there was, I mean, the main character was food, the plot was food, the resolution. I mean, there was literally no character work. It was just talking about lots of different types of food.
Walking
my
along the
experience-
markets.
And in my experience, when I was walking there, like or walking around like those markets or even going into stores, Italians are super friendly. They're like, "Hey man, you want some grappa?" And I'm like, "What's grappa?" They're like, "Come in the back. Let me show you where we got some grappa." And like they'll just give you this what is it made out of, like the grape skins or something like that? Like it's like a shot. This
Yes.
like the limoncello and stuff like that. Like they're super friendly, but super into food. Like, talk to me more about Italian food here.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no tradition really that is as important as food when it comes to Italy, especially because it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you always end up around the table with your family or friends or whoever it is, and food is extremely important. Probably historically for Italy, also because of the importance that Italian culture gives to the family, in itself. And so Italians are, in cultural terms, much more similar to Mediterranean people, Mediterranean cultures that really highlight the importance of being with your family, spending time with your family. It doesn't mean that Anglo-Saxon cultures do not, consider the family important, but there is a different degree, and so the children or sons and daughters leaving the home as soon as they hit around 18 or 19, which generally happens in Anglo-Saxon countries, historically is almost never happened in Italy. I mean, there are some excesses of my old friends who are still my age and still living with their parents, but that's a little bit excessive. But you get to an average of maybe university time and right after university, 25, 26, still living at home and then leaving. And even when they leave, maybe because they live in the same town, which is not very big, they will still spend a lot of time with the parents and keeping the family together, which I think the United States in particular, it's a country that doesn't lend itself to this because it's so easy for the US to just give you opportunity here, there, study here, study there. And so once you're 19, you're taking off, so that's a big difference. And of course, I mean, whenever I think about Christmas, the central character that my memory goes to, and maybe the warmest memories that I have, is my grandma Mima. Her name was Angela, but her nickname in the family was Mima, so Grandma Mima. And she used to prepare for us this. The name in Lecce dialect is Pittule, Pittule, Pittule. And if you look at them, they don't look very good. They're almost like the ugly but good. They're little ugly. You would say they're almost like gnocchi, but they're not because they are fried, and they're made with mainly potato, bread, capers, tuna, and anchovies, as well. So a concentrated of flavors, fried. And this, okay, as caloric as it sounds, was the antipasto for the Christmas evening. So
the appetizer, if you will.
Appetizer, you would get 4,500 calories as an appetizer.
Woo! Goodness.
Now, the important thing, pittole, and I'm sure if you Google, you can easily find pittole. They're delicious. They're absolutely delicious, which is part of the problem because once you start, you cannot stop. And this is the appetizer. Stop it. It's appetizer. The huge stuff is gonna come. There's more. But obviously you don't stop and you keep going. Now the psychological problem is that Grandma Mima would not accept a no, obviously, as saying no, I don't want that. And the other thing that she wouldn't accept is some leftovers, some food in your plate.
Oh no!
Right? Not only in terms of a discipline around the table, but in terms of a personal affront. You hate me. You hate me personally. You left a little piece of pitula in that plate. So, but she wouldn't be aggressive at all. She would be, very like, oh, yeah, I thought you're not a big fan of the pitule, right? Yeah, I know. That kind of passive killer aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would need to negotiate a lot of that type of psychological warfare.
Oh my God.
We usually wouldn't eat anything from the morning. And I mean, it wasn't that there was something very specific for dinner. And this is also interesting because some Italian families always make something particular as the main dish for their Christmas evening, but we didn't. And Grandma Mima used to make puglia or lecce type of meals and dishes, always changing. It could be one time it was scallops with gratin, with bread, crumbs and crumbs of bread, or she was great at making lasagnas of all different kinds, and that was only because we would do properly, appetizer first and then seconds with side dishes and dessert. So by the time you get to the dessert, the very best dessert she would make was tiramisu. And
my husband loves that stuff.
Yeah, but I don't know if I am able to explain to you that I might have tried hundreds of different tiramisu in the world, but never ever as just smooth as silk and light but tasty at the same time as Grandma Mima's. That was the absolute perfection.
That was love. It's because of the love.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You can't beat it. You can't beat it.
Can't beat that.
So
that sounds like so much more like Italian/romantic than my grandma. My grandma brought a cheese ball. Everyone wanted the cheese ball, and he's got like all this tiramisu and pitule, and I'm like, yeah, we had like Ritz crackers and cheese. It was cool.
See, it's a work of art because my husband's father cooks. He's got a cookbook that's coming out this year that's sweets. And he took his grandmother's recipes and he's kind of changed them and tweaked them a little bit. And he's printing a book, and he's also a photographer. So he took pictures of everything, and he wrote a little story about how he made that with his grandmother growing up or watching her make it as a kid. And there's just a whole bar full of pies, and cheesecake is his big claim to fame. And
wow,
I'm so ready.
Wow.
Tom, where does Pandoro or panettone fit on like the level of Christmas dishes? Because I ordered both of those. I was so excited. I sent you pictures when I read about them in the books, and you said like, oh yeah, you got to try this. I ordered it because it looks so good. Is that just like a staple, or is that something that you don't see as often there?
No, it is a staple. It definitely is a staple. It's something that you could say that is one of the few truly national food traditions, because you're going to find panettone in Lecce, in Sicily, and up in Trento, the same, because the two main brands in Italy are called Bauli and Melegatti. And I noticed here in Los Angeles, I can find some Bauli. I'm not sure about Melegatti. And then I can find some other brands that sound like Bauli, but they're not the original Italian ones. And there is a certain difference, of course. But, it's interesting because panettone is not something that is easy to make at home. You can, if you want, to make a panettone at home, but it's a pretty complicated and sophisticated cake to make. And it's originally from Milan. That's where he was born from. And then he kind of caught on and became a traditional staple for all Italy. The only difference between panettone and pandoro, as far as I know, I wouldn't want to speak, or say something wrong about this Italian tradition, but pandoro is simply a simplified version of panettone, because in the original panettone, there are a lot of raisins, but also candied fruit of all kinds, a lot of them. And some people, exactly like Leslie, some people are not very happy about candied fruit. So naturally, they have this alternative option. So you could say Pandoro is kind of a B series panettone that makes more people happy.
Be serious panettone. Okay. Tom, let me ask you another question. Krypton, we've read a lot of Russian stories over the last few years, and we'd see things on there like in terms of like today is so and so's name day, where there's like a day where like like they're celebrating the saint of that name and such. They mention that in some of the Italian stories too. Is that something that's still observed in Italy today, or is that a thing of the past?
No, for sure. It comes from the Catholic tradition, and that's where Saint Lucy, for example, it's a good example of, right, on December 13th every year is Saint Lucy. You got. I was kind of celebrating Saint Thomas, which I think happens twice a year, but it's on the 28th of January, and so the Italian calendar does have all the saints. If you buy a printed calendar in Italy, you will find the name of the saint on every day. That's how pervasive the Catholic Church is in Italian culture. So depending on how much religion matters for a specific family, then obviously on the night of the 24th, we were religious. We would go to Mass at midnight to celebrate Mass, and that was our main religious celebration. After dinner, a little bit in stupor, because after Grandma Mima's food, we would we'd still be able to. But it's cold enough to wake you up, and so the midnight Mass was the main type of. Some people in Italy celebrate the Christmas Mass on the 25th. And so every single tradition, when really you talk about Italian traditions, in one way or the other, will be linked to Catholic traditions.
Mm.
But yeah, you're
because
right.
we'd read this book and we were wondering if the book felt a little biased or if they were having to pick why they handpicked these stories, because they all felt a little bit sad and many of them had very heavy religious undertones. Some of them were overtly religious. There was no getting it, but everything seemed to have some type of tie to religion. So that makes a little bit more sense that is still the very focal point of Italy Christmas, even to this day, probably.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know about sad, because knowing a lot of Italian folklore stories, there's of all kinds, joyful, happy, sad, or not.
Okay, that's good.
But if I think about, very famous traditional story, think about Pinocchio. Okay, Pinocchio was written by Collodi. I don't know if you guys saw the latest Guillermo del Toro version of Pinocchio. I happen to have seen it only a couple of days ago, and it's wonderful. It's magnificent. It's really better than the classic Disney movie, in the sense that it takes away that excessive sugar that Disney gave to the story, and it makes it a little closer to the original by Carlo Collodi, who was the author of Pinocchio, and that and also brings back the presence of the church in the story of Pinocchio. It's not a religious story, but it's a story that, because it's Italian in the beginning of the 20th century, cannot prescind from having some kind of intertwined element of the church. And it's interesting because if you guys know another very famous typical Italian story or book, it's called Cuore, which means heart in Italian. Have you ever heard about it?
I haven't.
So I wrote a long review on Goodreads, just in case anybody wants to go there. But Cuore is a little bit older than Pinocchio. It's from 1870, 1880. And it's basically the story of an entire classroom during Italy, an Italian classroom, around the last decade of the 19th century. And it's great because the author was so anti-church that in the entire novel, it doesn't even mention Christmas. It doesn't even mention. He kind of took out every religious element, and that makes it sound very weird to an Italian, because you feel like, oh, something pretty Italian is missing here. And for this reason, Cuore, or heart, the author, by the way, is I'm gonna remember in a moment, but this particular story was taken by communist regimes later on in the 20th century, like for example Romania, Bulgaria, as a propaganda piece. So they were using it, or Poland as well, as a propaganda piece to show how good communist kids had to behave at school, discipline, because they didn't talk about religion. Very, very interesting little novel. And so that's in school, in Italian schools, they teach this heart, this cuore, and every single Italian student hates it. It's like, oh no, cuore, God. But
my extent of Italian Christmas knowledge is one thing: the song Dominic the Italian Christmas Donkey. And it is not Christmas time until I hear that song. I love that song.
The Italian Christmas Donkey? I don't even know it.
It's Dominic the Italian Christmas Donkey.
Definitely not an Italian song. I'll tell you that. Let's flip that around. Tom,
so
what are some Italian songs for those that are interested in checking out some more into, like, possibly Italian Christmas songs? What would be some that you would recommend for us to go listen and check out?
There are some traditional Christmas songs, and they are really folk songs that have to do with Christmas. So the title will have to do something with Christmas, which means Natale. So every song in Italian that has Natale in the title generally is one of those songs. But I have to say, sadly, I was asking my friends who live in Italy just recently. I was asking them, oh yeah, there was a friend of mine who was kind of complaining, I cannot go into any store and I get bombarded by this Christmas music. And I was asking him, okay, but is it Italian music or is it Mariah Carey? And he goes, and sadly, he said, it's actually Mariah Carey all the
No.
She's the queen of Christmas.
Can't even get away from her in Italy.
Mm-mm.
way.
I swear, midnight on October 31st, midnight, she starts playing here.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't stop until probably New
No.
Year's.
I don't have anything
Yeah.
against it, but it's not. Let's just say it's not an Italian traditional song.
No, that's fair. That's fair. All right, we're coming up on the end of our time here, Tom. I got one more question for you on my end. What was your most favorite present you've ever received? on
Oh my
Christmas?
God. Ooh. Okay. It was called Electrobral. Okay, and this was many many years ago, and it was an educational game to teach kids how electricity works. So you would have some obviously small batteries in the box. It was a box, and you would connect the cables, the two cables, right, to the positive and negative, and then you would
Shocked
have.
your brother, didn't you?
That's why
the first
that's
thing
why
I
he got
tried
the
to
coal.
do. That's actually the first thing I tried to do, but unfortunately, it was too low voltage.
Oh man.
But it's even now thinking back, there was such a great, really educational, game that was also incredible fun because you could build all sorts of little things with it, even at a very, very low voltage. That maybe still exists in some form or another, but I remember loving it so much. And I think the same year, my brother received something like the little chemist, one of those things.
Mhm.
What about you guys? I would
Awesome.
love to hear what your favorite gift was or present.
Probably my Atari when I was 5. That got me into video games.
Mm. That sounds familiar. Mine was the Nintendo, good old 8-bit.
Yeah.
We were playing hide and seek in my basement, and I accidentally stepped on this box that was hiding
Oh no!
Nintendo. And I was about 8 years old, so I saw this thing, and I was so excited because everyone at my school had Nintendo except me. And I ran upstairs. This is the only time in my life I've ever hyperventilated. I was like, "We got Nintendo!" And I was just so excited.
I remember when I got mine.
Yeah, but I wasn't allowed to play it until Christmas. They made me keep it wrapped.
What game did you play the most? Tetris?
It came with a 3-pack of Super Mario Brothers,
3.
Duck Hunt,
Okay.
and Track and Field. So we actually had the pad, and me and my sisters, it's like this pad of like 8 dots, and you'd stand,
wow.
you'd stand next to each other, and you're like racers. So it's like on your marks, get set, go, and you had to jump up and down on these dots as fast as possible to get your characters.
Well, I bet
to
your
go.
parents love that. Wore y'all out quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah, why don't you guys go play Track and Field? Wear yourselves out a little bit.
Super Mario 3 was the one I played the most on regular Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
What about you, Crypto?
I think I've told the story before a couple of years ago. I think when we did this on the very Russian Christmas, but 1991, I got my Super Nintendo. So mine was a video game console. We're all nerds. So, yep.
We just went in generations, like Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, like.
Yeah. I just am a generation a little further back.
Right, and I said some kind of fake little electrician. If we go back a little bit more, we get to a wooden horse.
Guys, thank you for spending time with us today. If you want to learn more about Tom and his awesome graphic novel, head over to his channel, Tom at LA Books, and ask him questions. Obviously, you can see he's a great guy. So please, thank you again for spending time, and spend some time getting to know Tom as well. Peace out, everyone.